She found the Korean Mafia boss's burner phone at 3 a.m. By morning, his father's empire belonged to her. The Kim family penthouse sits 45 floors above Seoul, and my husband had a specific way of describing it to people. The square footage, the view, what the renovation cost. He recited these numbers the way men recite things when they want you to understand that everything surrounding you belongs to them. But at 3 in the morning, standing barefoot on cold marble in the bathroom of the most expensive apartment I had ever slept in, I found the phone taped to the underside of the cabinet, and everything that was his started becoming mine. I had dropped my earring. That was all. A small gold hoop my father gave me on my 21st birthday, one of the last gifts before he died. It slipped from my hand at the sink and rolled under the cabinet, and I bent to find it, and my fingers found the edge of the tape before the earring. The burner phone was a cheap model. No case. No password. He had never imagined I would look there. I sat down on the bathroom floor and I read every message. His name for her in the phone was one initial. The kind of simplicity that speaks to long practice. They had been speaking for 14 months, 4 months longer than Kim Jae-sok and I had been married. The messages were ordinary in the way betrayals are always ordinary. Endearments, plans, the specific language of a Korean mafia boss who saves his warmth for somewhere private. But it was not the romantic messages that stopped my breathing. It was the last conversation. 3 days old. When are you telling her? After the quarterly meeting. The lawyers are already drafting the separation agreement. She gets the apartment lease and a settlement. She signs. She goes back to London. And the business? The empire? The empire is mine. Always has been. She has no claim to any of it. I read that exchange 4 times. She goes back to London. She has no claim to any of it. My husband had been planning my exit for 3 days, and I had sat across from him at dinner every single night, not knowing. I looked at the bathroom wall and understood, completely, immediately, with the specific clarity that only arrives at 3 in the morning when there is nothing left to protect, that I had been living inside a plan that did not include me staying. What Jae-sok had not known, what none of the 12 most powerful men in Seoul who sat on his council knew, was that the empire he believed was entirely his had been sitting on my father's name for 40 years. He was planning to leave me with nothing. He did not know I owned the ground he was standing on. If you have ever found something that ended an entire version of your life in a single moment, not slowly, not with warning, but all at once, drop your city or your country in the comments right now. Because what I did next was not what this Korean mafia boss expected. And it was exactly what my father had spent 20 years preparing me for. I did not go back to the bedroom immediately. I sat on the cold marble floor for 22 minutes. I watched the clock on the burner phone, the same phone he had used to plan my disappearance, and I thought about my father. Samuel Adeyemi had told me things I was not ready to hear. In the last year of his life, when illness had stripped everything away except clarity, he had tried to explain what he was leaving me. The Kim family empire runs on a foundation your grandfather and I built together 40 years ago. When I am gone, that foundation passes to you. All of it. You will understand what that means when you need to. I had nodded. I had held his hand. I had not asked the questions I should have asked because I had been 26 and in love and about to be married and certain that a dying man's worry was just a dying man's worry. Now I was 28, sitting on a bathroom floor, holding a Korean mafia boss's burner phone, understanding exactly what my father meant. I walked back to the bedroom. Jae-seok was asleep on his side. He slept the way powerful, dangerous men sleep. Completely, without visible effort, as if even rest was something he had mastered. The control was still there, even in sleep, but something underneath it was quieter. Almost like the man he might have been before he decided that building a criminal empire was the only thing worth his time. I stood at the foot of the bed and looked at him for a long time. He was still beautiful, sharp jaw, black hair against the pillow, his hand open beside him. the gold of his watch catching the city light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 45 floors above Seoul, and he had no idea what was happening in his own apartment. I had loved those hands once. I had believed in the stillness of them. I had called that stillness depth. I wondered how many plans he had made with those hands while I was watching them and calling it a marriage. I set the burner phone on my side of the bed, quietly, deliberately. Then I went to the kitchen and called my father's lawyer. Attorney Che answered on the first ring. I had her number because my father had written it in a small leather notebook he placed in my hands on my wedding day. Inside the front cover, in his handwriting, "For when you are ready, she has been waiting." Ms. Adeyemi, her voice was completely awake at 3 a.m., like she had been expecting this call for exactly 2 years. "I have been hoping to hear from you. My father said you would know what to do. I have known what to do since the day you married Kim Jae-seok. Your father was very specific about the triggering conditions for trust activation." She paused. "Do you have evidence of deliberate concealment or planned exclusion from foundational holdings?" I looked at the burner phone in my hand. "Yes," I said. "Then we begin at dawn," she said. "By morning, everything changes." The truth about Kim Jae-seok's empire was a truth most people in Seoul did not know, and those who did never discussed. 40 years ago, before Jae-seok was born, 2 men met at a shipping conference in London. One was Korean, one was Nigerian. They recognized in each other the specific kind of ambition that does not need to explain itself because it is too busy building. Kim Se-jun and Samuel Adeyemi built the original holding structure of what would become the Kim Group Foundational Trust. Not the visible criminal empire, not the hotels and security operations and logistics networks that Jae-seok managed with an iron hand. The legal architecture beneath all of it. The foundational agreement that made every other agreement possible. When Kim Se-jun died 11 years ago, his shares passed to Jae-seok. When Samuel Adeyemi died 3 years ago, his shares passed to me. 47% of the foundational trust. The Korean Mafia boss who had typed she has no claim to any of it owned 53% of his own empire. I owned the rest. He had been planning to send me back to London with an apartment lease and a settlement number while I was sitting on nearly half of everything he had ever called his. The empire he had built his entire criminal identity on was half mine before we ever met. He found me in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. I was at the counter with 2 cups of coffee and the burner phone between them. He appeared in the doorway in his robe. His eyes went immediately to the phone. Not to me. To the phone. That told me everything about where his real concern lived. "Zuri." "There is coffee," I said. "Sit down." He did not sit. He moved toward the counter, toward the phone, his hand reaching across the marble. I placed my hand on the burner phone before his arrived. Just my hand. Flat. Calm. Not fighting him. Not snatching it away. Simply making clear, in front of no one, in the kitchen of his own penthouse, that this object and everything recorded on it was going to remain exactly where I had placed it until I decided to move it. His hand stopped 4 inches from mine. In 2 years of this marriage, I had never reached for anything in his world before he offered it. I had been careful and accommodating and patient. I had called it love. I had called it partnership. I had called it being a good wife to a Korean mafia boss who terrified everyone except me. He looked at my hand on the phone, then at my face. The Korean mafia boss calculated everything. I had watched him do it across 2 years of boardroom dinners and council meetings and family gatherings. He measured consequence before he moved. He was doing it now, running the numbers, assessing what I knew, calculating what position he was in. "How long have you had that?" he said quietly. "Since 3 o'clock this morning," I said. Something moved through his expression. Not guilt. He was too disciplined for visible guilt. Recalculation. He was a powerful, dangerous man encountering a variable he had not entered into his equation. "Whatever you think you read, she goes back to London," I said. "She has no claim to any of it." The silence that followed was the most complete I had ever heard from Jae-seok. "That is what you told her 3 days ago," I continued. "About me?" I read it 4 times. The specific stillness of a Korean mafia boss who has just realized his most carefully concealed private life has been witnessed by the one person he did not protect it from. "That conversation is documented," I said. "Attorney Che has a copy. She has had it since 4 this morning. Your foundational trust co-administrator has also been notified. What would you have done? Found in a burner phone, planned out of your own marriage, sitting across from a Korean mafia boss who had already written your exit, would you have confronted him that morning or waited until every document was in place? Tell me in the comments." Because the choice I made in that kitchen was the reason I walked out of his empire as its co-owner, and not as his settlement payment. Jae-seok sat down. Kim Jae-seok, who had never sat in a room he did not command, who had built one of Seoul's most dangerous criminal empires on controlled authority and cold calculation, sat down in his own kitchen. "What do you want?" he asked. The question revealed more than he intended. He was already in negotiation mode, already calculating the number that would contain this, already looking for the settlement that would make the Korean mafia boss's betrayed wife disappear quietly and quickly. "Call Director O," I said. He frowned. "Why?" "Because he needs to explain to you what my father's name means on your foundational trust documents." The silence that followed was the longest I had recorded from this man. He looked at me the way men look at something when they realize it is much larger than their initial assessment. When the plan they believed was complete turns out to have a variable they never entered. "Samuel Adeyemi," he said slowly, like he was placing the name somewhere in a map he had never finished drawing. "Your father's original business partner," I said. "His 47% of the Kim Group Foundational Trust passed to me 3 years ago. Attorney Che has all documentation. Director O and 3 council members have been copied on the activation filing since dawn." His hand on the counter moved, just slightly, just the small specific movement I had spent 2 years learning to read. He was understanding what 3 years of unread documents had cost him. He called Director O at 7 in the morning. The call lasted 4 minutes. I heard the quality of the silences changing from the kitchen. The first silence impatient, the second longer, the third the kind that means a man is reorganizing everything he believed about his own position. He came back and stood in the doorway. 47%, he said. "Yes. Your father built—" "The foundation your father built on top of," I said. "Yes." He looked at me for a long time. Then he took 1 step toward the counter. His voice dropped, lower than his boardroom voice, lower than his council voice. Something underneath the Korean mafia boss, the calculated authority, the cold control. "Zuri?" My name in his voice sounded like something he was afraid of losing. "This marriage, whatever the documents say, this doesn't have to—" He reached for my hand. I felt it, the ghost of the man I had chosen somewhere underneath the man who had typed those messages, his hand moving toward mine. The almost closing the distance. I picked up the burner phone and placed it in my bag. "Your lawyers will hear from Attorney Che this morning," I said. "I suggest you make yourself available." His hand stopped in the air between us. The almost closed. I walked out of the kitchen. The boardroom meeting was at 10. Attorney Che and I arrived at Kim Group headquarters at 9:45. Director O was already in the lobby. He bowed when he saw me. Not a polite bow, a significant one. The kind that carries recognition of actual power. 2 other council members were with him. All 3 had come early. None of them had called Jae-seok first. The boardroom restructuring took 3 hours. Documents. Signatures. Attorney Che's precise explanations of foundational trust law and the specific rights of a 47% beneficiary in active governance. Not loud, not dramatic. Exact. At 11, Kim Jae-seok arrived at his own headquarters. His assistant told him the Foundational Council was in session. He asked with who. The answer came back, the senior trust beneficiary and her legal team. The Korean mafia boss stood in the corridor of the building his father had named after their family. the building whose foundation bore another family's name below the surface, and understood what 47% of the Kim Group Foundational Trust actually meant. He had typed that she had no claim to any of it. He had been wrong about that before they ever met. By morning, his father's empire belonged to her, not because she had taken it, because it had always been hers to hold. He sent a message at noon, not to my phone, through his lawyers to Attorney Che. Mr. Kim wishes to discuss a resolution. Attorney Che showed it to me over lunch at a small restaurant near her office, the kind that has been there long enough not to care who walks through the door. I read it. Then I ordered dessert. What a Korean mafia boss calls a resolution and what a 47% foundational trust beneficiary understands a resolution to mean are two entirely different things, and both of us knew it. He wanted to negotiate. He wanted to find the number. He wanted to return to the version of this marriage where I was the woman who had not read her father's documents and he was the man with a burner phone and a separation agreement already drafted. That version no longer existed. What came through attorneys, documents, governance restructuring, foundational trust law was not a negotiation. It was a recognition. My father's name on what my father had helped build, my position in what my father had helped create, not his wife, not his betrayed spouse, not the woman who goes back to London. Samuel Adeyemi's daughter, senior trust beneficiary of the Kim Group Foundational Trust, the person his father's criminal empire had to answer to. I found the Korean mafia boss's burner phone at 3 a.m. By morning, his father's empire belonged to me, not because I destroyed him, because I finally read what my father left me. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever been underestimated by someone who did not bother to check what you were actually holding, subscribe right now. Drop your city or your country below and tell me the moment you knew the Korean mafia boss had already lost. This channel exists for every woman who was counted out, planned around, and discovered that what they were sitting on was worth more than anyone in the room had bothered to check. More stories are coming. Stay with me.